In our first story, Behind Mansion Walls, from Russia, with love.
She was absolutely beautiful.
High-tech money meets international intrigue.
Nina might be stealing his secrets.
And later, brave children.
2 little boys covered in blood.
Wonder who killed Mom.
Only thing he was interested in was money. Nothing else.
I'm Christopher Mason. Living large in the lap of luxury, life can seem like a delectable dream. But so often the rich just want more. Temptation waits behind mansion walls with a wicked ménage à trois. Sex, money, and murder.
On a Saturday evening in the hills behind Oakland, California, Ellen Doran makes a desperate phone call to her best friend, Nina Reiser.
Called and called and called, and nobody answered.
Nina, I'm really worried.
She was supposed to meet Ellen at 6 p.m. for dinner that evening on September 3rd.
Ellen knows Nina well enough to know that something is very wrong.
Nina never showed up to meet with her friend.
Nina Reiser is a typical Oakland soccer mom with a twist.
Nina grew up in Russia.
Nina was well-educated. She was a doctor, and she was an OB/GYN.
There was no mistaking that Nina was beautiful. She drew people in with her personality and her looks.
Her disappearance strikes a chord with Henry Lee, a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle.
I covered this case from the very beginning. When the first few news bulletins came out that Nina was missing, I immediately knew something was unusual.
Nina, 31, is separated from her husband, 43-year-old Hans Reiser. On the day she disappears, she is on her way to drop off their 2 children after a custody visit.
Nina took her 2 kids to a supermarket in Berkeley, and this was caught on camera. And it was then up to Nina to bring the kids to Hans's house in the Oakland Hills.
It's just another Saturday drop-off in just another fractured American family. Her 7-year-old son, Rory, says he waved goodbye to Mom that day.
I'll see you both later. Love you.
Rory gave certain accounts that Nina was last seen leaving up the stairs and left the house.
Rory would never see his mother again.
Nina completely vanished from the face of the earth.
Born in St. Petersburg, Russia, Nina Reiser never expected to end up in the suburbs of Oakland. She married into the great gold rush of the 21st century, computer technology. It made Bill Gates $59 billion and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg $17 billion. Nina Reiser's husband, Hans, was eager to join the ranks of these legendary sultans of software.
Hans was extremely intelligent. He went to UC Berkeley as a teenager and decided to make computing his career. He started his own business, and he developed a file system that he named after himself called Reiser FS.
It was quite clear that he was a very bright man, but also very eccentric and, you know, a computer nerd, a geek. He was on his way to really making a lot of money.
In 1999, business is booming for Hans, but he's having trouble with another part of his life.
He knows a lot about computers, but socially he was pretty awkward. He did not know how to talk to people.
So where is a nerdy computer genius to find the love of a beautiful woman? The same place he sources much of his workforce. Russia.
While he was in Russia, he would frequently date women, sometimes out of catalogs.
On one of these dates, Hans falls for the translator, Nina. She's exotic, intelligent, beautiful.
Her mother and father were both doctors, and they lived in the well-to-do Russian middle class. So she wasn't one of these desperate women trying to escape a horrible situation.
Nina herself is a doctor, eager to practice in the U.S. But is it true love or a big opportunity?
It's hard to know what it was about Hans that captured Nina. He was an American man, seemed to be quite successful.
There were several people that thought that maybe she was a gold digger, kind of looking for a ticket to the States.
Hans Reiser's father has a different fear. Hans has some big backers, including the U.S. Department of Defense. Does his new wife have a hidden agenda?
He believed that Nina might be stealing his secrets.
By 2004, Hans and Nina have 2 children and a marriage that's heading for the rocks.
Hans didn't want Nina to become a doctor. In fact, he wanted her to stay home, have more children, and then really tend to the home activities and be a housewife or a homemaker.
Nina believed that she was like a locked bird in a cage, unable to get out, constrained by her husband, and told what she could and could not do.
Hans is also away on business in Russia for long stretches. So he arranges for some wife sitting.
He left his best friend to look after Nina, pretty much with the instructions of, take care of her, make sure nothing happens to her. And that was the beginning of the end.
Hans returns from Russia to a man's worst fear.
He was my best friend.
You will never hear. What did you think would happen?
His wife and best friend sharing a bed. A bitter feud follows, and Nina files for divorce. It won't be an amicable split.
You ungrateful bitch.
You've never done anything for anyone but yourself.
Hans would fight Nina every step of the way during the divorce when they were arguing about what was best for the children.
I've been nothing but a loving father to his kid.
You don't know about love.
And for Hans, his main gripe is the raising of his son, Rory.
Nina didn't want Rory playing violent video games, and Hans encouraged it.
He believed Rory was just like him, perfect, that Rory needed to have the best doctors, the best teachers, the best kinds of experts available.
So on September 3rd, 2006, when Nina Reiser disappears, it isn't long before police return to her estranged husband's doorstep.
The police were quite interested in talking to Hans to find out where Nina was. Certainly, he was the last person who had seen her, and he might have some valuable information.
When told the mother of his children is missing, his first reaction is, talk to my lawyer.
He wouldn't answer any questions that the police had, and so it was obvious that Hans was unwilling to cooperate from the get-go.
Has he got something to hide, or has he fallen into a trap?
Nina was alive and well. This was part of a grand conspiracy to get him framed and convicted for murder and allow her to have custody of the children full-time in Russia.
Infidelity, divorce, custody, money, jealousy, and anger. It's fertile ground for murder.
Nina completely vanished from the face of the earth.
When Nina Reiser disappears from Oakland in 2006, police soon fear the worst.
She just wouldn't up and leave. She had ambitions. She had a new job. She had just gone to the store and she had bought groceries.
She was last seen by her estranged husband and their children on a Saturday afternoon on Labor Day weekend.
The last known place that she was at Hans's home at probably 2:15, 2:30.
6 days later, her car is found abandoned just 2 miles away.
All of the groceries from her shopping trip were sitting in the back of her car rotting. Her purse was there, her money was there, her wallet, credit cards.
And her cell phone.
The battery is removed. I mean, people just don't drive around with the battery removed from their phone.
With the battery removed, the cell phone can't be tracked. Police turn to suspect number 1, the estranged husband, Hans Reiser.
Hans won't talk to the cops. He seems to be worried that bigger and far more dangerous fish are on his tail. When you mix connections to Russia and defense contracts, you get a plot right out of a Cold War spy thriller. And right now, Hans Reiser is acting like he's in the starring role.
He was engaging in counter-surveillance, driving 10 miles an hour on the freeway, making unnecessary U-turns. He turned his cell phone off and was walking around without his cell phone on for days on end.
I ended up chasing Hans Reiser down the street in Oakland. I was trying to get comment from him, and instead of saying no comment or politely saying no thanks, he took off at full tilt, running at full speed away from me.
So, I mean, there's just a lot of behavior that just didn't fit. Didn't fit at all.
But the Oakland police have little else to go on.
Doing an investigation when there's no body, it's really hard.
One thing they're wondering about is, where is Reiser's car? He's been driving his mom's car since the day Nina disappeared. And 2 weeks into the investigation, in a back street of Oakland, his car is found.
It was missing the right front passenger seat. The carpets were completely soaked with water, as if someone had hosed the inside of the car out. I mean, it was really, really suspicious.
Hans had an outlandish excuse for everything. He said, you know, I decided that the car smelled of old milk stains from the kids, so I decided to wash it to get it all clean, and also remove the seat because I was sleeping in it, and I have a bad back, and I want to make it comfortable.
But Hans finds it harder to explain this.
There were 2 books found inside. There was a book on homicide and murder. There wasn't a book on where do I find my wife or how to find a missing person.
Cops decide to take a closer look at his house.
Investigators say blood found in Hans Reiser's house could belong to Nina Reiser. They found 2 books about murder in his car.
They found a blood stain about 3 or 4 feet from the front door. The DNA results showed that it was a mixture of Hans and Nina's DNA.
Even when there was no smoking gun, that all the pieces pointed squarely at him and only him.
Oakland DA Paul Hora thinks he's got enough to go to trial. Even though there's no body, no weapon, no eyewitnesses.
I was convinced that Hans was the killer. The challenge is whether or not I'm going to be able to convince somebody else.
After Hans Reiser's arrest, his children are sent to live with their grandmother, back in Russia. And at trial, he says that this is all part of Nina Reiser's master plan.
He suggested on the stand that Nina was alive and well and possibly framing him to make it look like he killed her.
He says that Nina is back in St. Petersburg, celebrating with a U.S. passport and the kids to herself. A perfect crime.
When I started the trial, Nina was gone and her kids were gone. And I was left with this possibility, well, maybe she's over there in Russia with her kids and her family and all's well.
But the DA presents damning evidence from a phone tap.
Hans placed a phone call to his mother about 2 weeks following Nina's disappearance, where he just unloads on her and he tries to convince his mother how horrible she is.
She didn't just abuse me. She looked for every possible way she could screw me.
And I said to the jury, he's just telling us why he killed Nina. That's what he was really doing on that phone call. He was trying to convince his mother why it was okay for him to kill Nina.
Then, a surprise witness returns from Russia, Hans's young son, Rory. And what he shows the court shocks everyone. A drawing he did not long after his mother disappeared. His dad dragging a large bag down to the basement. Is this how he last saw his mother? Hans Reiser has his back against the wall.
Hans demanded to take the stand against the advice of his attorneys. He spent 11 days testifying, and what came out of his mouth was pure arrogance, pure ego.
He underestimated the power of the jurors to see the truth. And he also underestimated the strength of the evidence against him. And in the end, he helped the jury convict him.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Hans Reiser, guilty of a murder.
And on April 28, 2008, Hans Reiser is found guilty of first-degree murder. In California, the sentence is 25 years to life. That gives Hans pause for thought.
Before his sentencing in July, I made a deal with him because Nina's family was desperate for the recovery of Nina's body. And I agreed that I would reduce his first-degree murder to a second-degree murder conviction. In exchange, he would have to show me the location of Nina's body, he would have to tell me how he killed her, and he would have to waive all of his rights to appeal. He finally admitted that he did, in fact, kill Nina.
Handcuffed to his attorney, Hans leads police up into the Oakland Hills. And less than a mile from his house,
Police used shovels and began digging, and they found a sleeping bag buried inside the hole. And eventually they exhumed the sleeping bag and found Nina's body inside.
Nina Reiser's body in a bag, just like the one in her son Rory's drawing. And to get his plea deal, Hans tells the real story of Labor Day weekend, 2006.
He said that Nina did come to the house and that they started talking about the separation.
The two children went downstairs. And Hans and Nina had one last argument, one final bitter dispute.
Nina looked at him in a certain way and maybe smiled a certain way that Hans didn't like. Hans punched her and then choked her to death, right there on the spot.
It was a very cold-blooded, callous attack, and all the more shocking because this happened while their children were downstairs.
And with his trademark efficiency, Hans goes to work, under cover of darkness, with a shovel.
He just unceremoniously dumped his wife's body in a sleeping bag into the hole, recovered it, and then pretended that nothing had happened. Hans is now behind bars for at least 15 years to life, and unless he pleads for mercy and expresses remorse, he will not be released anytime soon.
And while Hans Reiser languishes in Pleasant Valley State Prison, Nina's family is finally able to bring her home.
Nina, instead of being buried in a hole in the Oakland Hills, has been taken back to Russia. Her remains are now in Russia, and that's where her kids are now.
Hans killed his wife, a loving mother, a committed daughter, a doctor, and just a lovely lady.
The greatest tragedy of this case is the two young children, who are now effectively orphaned. They'll never see either parent again.
Still to come, behind mansion walls.
Something was just wildly amiss here.
Dirty money and dirty secrets.
Gruesome. Blew half her head off.
Shatter the perfect American family.
If there's ever been a case that deserved the death penalty, this was one of them.
It's Sunday night of Thanksgiving weekend 1992. In the well-to-do suburbs north of Atlanta.
They ran hand in hand across the field, approximately 100 yards, to a home that had some lights on.
They arrive there and they ring the doorbell.
A suburban Christian ministry has some surprise late-night callers.
Two little boys covered in blood.
Hey, boys, what's happening? What's going on?
The boys lead the way to an SUV in a nearby field. When the door is opened, a woman's body tumbles out.
There was a lot of blood, there was a lot of gore.
Gruesome. Blew half her head off.
In 1992, people are being shot on the streets of Atlanta every day. It's become the most dangerous city in America, thanks to the crack epidemic plaguing the nation. But this victim is different. She is Sara Tokars, the well-to-do wife of renowned attorney Fred Tokars, a wealthy, beautiful mother of two whose death will shock this freewheeling city to its core.
This case caught the interest of the whole metro Atlanta area.
For Atlanta's elite, it strikes too close to home in wealthy suburban Marietta. Sara Tokars is one of their own. If she isn't safe here, who is?
People were very afraid for their wives, their children.
Sara's husband, Fred, is a big-shot attorney, moving in powerful circles.
I came to know him and also his reputation there. Fred was known as being one who was smart, intelligent.
He knew a lot of people in the court system, in the political system of Atlanta. He was a real go-getter.
Working for the DA's office, Fred is a star prosecutor, locking up the bad guys. And Sara takes notice.
He was dynamic in that he was a very hard-working young attorney. Because of the people he knew, I think that impressed Sara. Fred's family was an upper-middle-class family, Sara's family being a well-to-do doctor's family. So they both came from some means.
A successful lawyer from a rich family. A beautiful blonde doctor's daughter. It's a suitable match for blue blood breeding. They marry and have 2 sons.
Fred and Sara were the perfect family, a family that you would expect to see here in the suburbs of Atlanta and in Cobb County.
Families like this are rarely touched by murder.
Something was just wildly amiss here.
Within hours of the murder, Cobb County DA Tom Sharon is called onto the case.
My first thought was, this just was not the type of neighborhood where you're going to see number one, a homicide, number 2, a shooting in a vehicle in front of 2 little children.
At the scene of the killing, police find little physical evidence. What they do have are eyewitnesses, aged 4 and 6.
We were able to get information from Ricky, who showed tremendous poise for what he had just witnessed. I mean, he was able to give very detailed information while he was sitting in the ambulance, literally with his mother's blood and brains on him.
6-year-old Ricky Tokars tells police the horrifying story of the night his life changed forever. His mom had just arrived home from a family Thanksgiving vacation in Florida.
Get back in the car!
Sara and Ricky were confronted by what Ricky described as a black man with a ski cap on, dark clothes, and what he called a pirate's gun.
His story gives police their first lead.
Once Ricky told us about a man coming from inside the house, the investigation shifted to the house. Was this a home invasion? Was there a burglary?
But the alarm was deactivated, and the back door was unlocked. The intruders had just walked into the house.
When the detectives did a detailed search of the home, they didn't find anything missing.
The death of Sara Tokars is looking less like a burglary gone wrong and more like a targeted execution.
Somebody wanted Sara Tokars dead. The big question was, who would want a housewife with 2 little boys murdered?
While Sara Tokars is taking her last breath, her husband Fred is off on business in Alabama. Is he the real target of the killers? As a prosecutor with the DA's office, he had put away his share of dangerous criminals.
The detectives wanted to know a list of clients or people that he thought, names, that would have a grudge against him.
Is this a Cape Fear copycat? Revenge on a prosecutor's family? Young Ricky Tokars may have the answer as he bravely reveals more about his mother's murder.
They got approximately a mile and a half down the road, with Sara pleading with the man with the pirate gun not to hurt her or her children, that she'd be happy to drive him wherever, but just leave us alone.
The man orders Sara to turn right.
Just turn! Turn!
Sara refused, Ricky said, and the gun went off.
Her body hitting the wheel caused the vehicle to veer to the left off the road and into an open field.
Ricky has been taught that a car should never be left running. His mom isn't moving. He knows he needs to get help.
Got out, unbuckled his 4-year-old brother, woke him up, and they ran hand in hand across the field.
But there is no helping Sara Tokars. Random violence or coldly targeted hit. All police have is the eyewitness account of a 6-year-old boy, and not a suspect in sight.
We literally did not have anybody that you could point to, that you could even go question.
Until one man comes forward who can help those little boys find justice for their mother.
She said, if anything ever happens to me, will you promise me that you'll go to the police with everything you know?
In the affluent northern suburbs of Atlanta, the wealthy like to think they are safe from the crime that plagues some parts of their city. But Sara Tokars didn't stand a chance.
This was one of the most horrible murders because of the manner and circumstances of the killing.
An ex-cheerleader and doting mother shot dead in front of her 2 boys. All police have is her son's eyewitness account. It was a black man with a pirate gun.
Her purse and all of her belongings were in the car, so we knew right off the bat that we didn't have a carjacking or a robbery.
While it has all the hallmarks of a planned execution, police are baffled. Why Sara? But Sara would not have been surprised. She already feared this day.
Sara Tokars told me if anything ever happened to her, would I take whatever information I had to the police officers.
Private Detective Ralph Perdomo was hired by Sara before her death.
Sara came in and sat down and told us that, she felt like her husband was running around on her and that he might be involved in other activities. We took the case and started it from there.
When Sara fell in love with Fred, he was an idealistic young prosecutor. But times have changed.
We need to talk.
Fred has a new passion that he holds above justice.
I can't say right now.
Fred needed money. He liked to have a good life. He wanted to spend.
One of his partners told me that Fred worshiped money. That's the only thing he was interested in, was money. Nothing else.
So we'll see a return in half the time then.
He felt like he wasn't making enough money as a prosecutor.
Let's see if you collect the evidence.
So Fred switches sides and turns defense lawyer with clients from the rough end of town.
He was in private practice representing drug dealers where the big money is, also with the people in the nightlife, the nightclub industry.
Fred becomes a Mr. Fix-It for the underworld, the go-to guy for hoodlums who need a creative attorney on the payroll. And Nerdy Fred gets a cool new nickname, The Man. He loves it.
I'm sure the club will be a great success.
Well, thanks to you, it will be.
Riding in limousines, throwing around a lot of cash, spending a lot of money, having offshore accounts in the Caribbean. He was frequenting a lot of these nightclubs where drug laundering money was going on. He was a frequent customer of strip clubs, all sorts of adult entertainment areas of town.
Guys, change the plan. Have a good order meeting, all right? Have a good day.
This is not the kind of marriage that Sara Tokars signed up for.
After the birth of their second son, Fred started to become more distant from the family.
Is my concern. You're supposed to be spending time with the kids.
Evenings, he would never be home for dinner. Weekends, he always seemed to have business away from home.
You'll get over it.
Fred clearly was not interested in maintaining a married life with Sara and two boys.
Sara suspects her husband of infidelity. Her private detective confirms it.
He was associating with people he shouldn't be associating with. And she found out that Fred was running around on her through the private investigator she hired.
Hookers and limos. Affairs with strippers. It's a well-to-do wife's worst nightmare.
This ultimately led to her wanting a divorce from Fred.
But Sara is paralyzed by fear.
She truly believed that Fred had enough contacts that she would lose her children and be penniless. And so she was very reluctant to go forward.
Sara needs some serious leverage to challenge a man of Fred's position. Fred has many secrets. Some of them are locked inside his safe. And Sara knows the combination.
She started finding paperwork that suggested that he was setting up offshore accounts in the Caribbean, in the Caicos Islands.
It's direct evidence of money laundering on a grand scale.
I said, make 2 copies of them. Give one to your attorney, give one to a good friend, and put them back before Fred gets home.
Now, Sara has the power to scare Fred into a divorce, one that will give her custody of the children. She confronts her husband.
We're getting a divorce.
And that's really where she was in November of 1992 when the murder took place. And she had told Fred that she was after divorce, and she had information on him.
You just be careful now, Sara.
The private detective's revelations make Fred look like a prime suspect in his wife's murder. But Fred was in another state on the night of the shooting. Police need to find the trigger man. And one lady in Atlanta holds the answers.
What's your emergency? I want to report a shooting.
Tuesday Rower came forward with how she helped him wash blood off of his sneakers.
In the wealthy suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, the rich are consumed by the murder of one of their own. Attractive mother of two, Sara Tokars.
Cameras were camped outside the police department, and there were daily news conferences.
A $25,000 reward is offered for information leading to Sara's killer. And in the poor end of town, Tuesday Rower knows who that killer is.
I want to report a shooting.
It's her brother Curtis, a desperate crack addict.
We found out where he was living with the help of the Atlanta Police Department. We went to that location in Atlanta and arrested him.
It turns out Curtis has been bragging around the neighborhood about his diabolical handiwork. When police come knocking on his door, he hides under the bed. Desperate and strung out, he knows why they're here, and he's terrified. A black man who murders a rich white woman in Georgia is in deep trouble.
Curtis Rower, the trigger man, immediately confesses on tape. Yes, I was the one that kidnapped him. I'm the one that was holding the gun.
But he says the gun went off by accident, bumped by her driving.
Well, the obvious next question was, if you weren't concerned with killing her, why were you out there? And that's when we started to get the information that Curtis was hired to shoot this lady, that he, in fact, was going to receive $5,000.
To think that $5,000 could buy a trigger man to murder a woman in the presence of the two boys is unthinkable. But the truth of the matter is that he would have done it for $500 to get money for dope.
Curtis is no hitman. He's a junkie who'd do anything for cash. And now he's got a shot at death row. It's not long before Curtis tells who paid for the hit. A man named Eddie Lawrence.
He was about 26, 27 years old at this time. Very clean cut, very dynamic speaker.
Twice as fast.
He had a home improvement, real estate business.
Eddie Lawrence is well known as an ambitious young businessman who looks like he's going places.
Within a very short period of time, the police arrested Eddie Lawrence.
Eddie has some connections with the big end of town. His partner in a construction firm is Fred Tokars. Curtis Rower's sister, Tuesday, is Eddie's secretary. Investigators now have a direct link between Fred and the man who murdered his wife. Fred is visiting with Sara's family when there's a call for him.
So Fred picked up the phone.
This Captain Deal with Cobb County Police.
Yes, sir.
Captain Deal said, Fred, we got great news.
I want you to know we've made 2 arrests in your wife's murder.
Okay.
One of them is your business partner, Eddie Lawrence. Silence on the line. Finally, Fred said,
Okay.
The next day, Sara's family can't get a hold of Fred. They rush to his hotel room.
They got the hotel manager to come and open it up, and Fred was laying unconscious on the bed. And there was a suicide note, basically saying that he had been hounded by the press. Nobody believed him, that he just had to end his life.
Fred has taken an overdose of pills, but he doesn't die. Sara's father, a doctor, saves his life.
When I got the telephone call that Fred Tokars was in the hospital and had tried to take his life, right on the heels of Eddie Lawrence and Curtis Rower being arrested, we said, we know, we got our man now.
Fred Tokars doesn't think so.
I emphatically deny any involvement in my wife's murder.
He holds a press conference after his overdose, mourning for his wife.
The murder of my wife, Sara, was the most tragic event that has ever occurred to me in my entire life. I am failing.
And mourning for himself.
I became very depressed and started to think of the lifestyle that I was losing. Not only my wife, but my whole lifestyle.
8 months later, Eddie Lawrence cracks.
When they saw we had a case on him and we were seeking the death penalty, he decided to cooperate. So he tells it all.
Eddie owed Fred Tokars $70,000. If he found someone to kill Fred's wife, Fred would cancel the debt.
We need to talk.
Eddie also knows all about Fred's laundering of Atlanta drug money. In 1993, Tokars is found guilty of racketeering and sentenced to life without parole. But the state of Georgia wants Fred to pay the ultimate price. In 1997, he goes on trial for his wife's murder.
If there's ever been a case that deserved the death penalty, this was one of them.
This was a difficult case from a prosecution standpoint. We had to rely on people who were known liars, cheats, and criminals.
But Atlanta's underworld gives some compelling testimony.
Actually had a prostitute testify on trial that one night Fred picked her up in a limousine.
Know anyone who can get rid of her for me?
During the course of their riding in the limousine,
She knows too much.
he told her that he was no longer in love with his wife and, in fact, needed to get rid of her.
Well, that's Fred.
In March 1997, more than 4 years after Sara is murdered, the jury finds Fred Tokars guilty. He escapes death row and gets life.
Sara's family were very sorrowful about the jury not imposing the death penalty. They wanted to see the ultimate sentence imposed.
On the inside, Fred Tokars has turned informant. Now he is in the federal prisoner witness protection system. His exact whereabouts are a closely guarded secret.
There's no lower human being on earth. In fact, he is completely inhumane.
He was an extremely selfish individual. What Sara thought was a good drive to get ahead was a greedy drive to be rich and powerful.
I wish I could have done more for her. I honestly, sincerely wish I could have done more for her.
Lust, wealth, and power can be dangerous bedfellows, but sometimes the rich just can't help themselves. To punish her infidelity, Hans Reiser killed his wife with his bare hands. Fred Tokars had the mother of his children executed to protect his sordid lifestyle. Sex and money led them into temptation. They thought murder was the only way out. Till next we meet, behind mansion walls, I'm Christopher Mason.